Next from Chicago, our contributing correspondent Jeff Berkowitz talks with Kristin McQueary, editorial board writer with the Chicago Tribune. We hear her discuss the different members of the editorial board, how the editorials are written and selected, and her insights into the Chicago Tribune's philosophical approach to public policy. This runs about 30 minutes.
You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name and politics is our game. And we're going to be doing lots of politics, or discussing lots of politics and public policy this evening, because as I said, we have a guest, Kristin McQueary, a woman, a young lady I should say, who I've long admired, because before she was on the Chicago Tribune editorial board, she was a political columnist that once was the Daily Southdown, then merged with the Star.
Correct.
And what did you spend, 12 years or so writing political columns?
I did. I spent about half the time as a straight news reporter covering politics and government, and then the second half, about 6 years, writing a column. And editorials, too.
And the columns would be both investigative, reporting, opinion, all mushed together, sort of, or sometimes separate?
They were. I mean, they were...
A lot of more reporting than or were you an opinion journalist?
Toward the end, when that's all I was doing, then yes, I had the freedom to write opinion columns, but mostly I was writing about our lawmakers from the south suburbs and what they were doing, and elections and little scandals, and kind of lifting the curtain a little bit on politics just in that area.
Step back for a second. Give people a flavor of what you covered, the geographic area, because you mentioned before the show when they were talking, a lot of your emphasis was on the south suburbs that were within the reach of those newspapers.
Right.
Where were they? Give people an idea.
So the Southtown, when I first started, was pretty much everything south of I-55. So the south side of the city, and everything from Midway Airport out to Will County, and then over to the Indiana line. Orland Park, Tinley Park were kind of our hubs.
So tick off like 20 or 25 suburbs that were within your reach.
Calumet City, Lansing, Glenwood, Harvey, Robbins, Dixmoor, Alsip, Crestwood, and then all the way over to Homer Glen, Frankfort, New Lenox, Plainfield, Bolingbrook.
That about does it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And you covered a lot of your beat was the state legislature, right?
It was.
Okay. As a part of that, but you have to know that, the suburban races in those areas you mentioned. So, and you were passionate about a number of things in politics. Would that be correct?
You could say that, yes.
What are you most passionate about in terms of public policy?
In terms of public policy, I mean, you mean issues or
well,
just...
because right now, you're an editorial board writer. Mm-hmm. We should step back and tell people there are 11 people on the editorial board, right? I mean, there is Bruce Stold, who's kind of the king. I don't know if he
yes.
is like a major guy, and that's meant to be as a compliment.
Yeah.
Because Bruce is the editorial page editor.
Yes.
Which means there's never a byline, but if somebody goes wrong, if there's a major change, they probably look to Bruce as the collective, even though he knows somebody like you is writing, Chapman is writing, we'll go through all those in a second. So others are actually doing the writing, but Bruce is kind of involved in everything that goes on the editorial page, right?
It's his
Every
page.
editorial, right? It's his page.
It's his page, yeah.
And sometimes, well, tell me, so you folks meet every Monday and Thursday, right?
We do. We meet for an hour twice a week. We bring ideas. We pitch ideas basically to the board. You come prepared with 2 or 3 ideas that you think we should editorialize about for that week. And, we toss the story around, we debate. Sometimes, I'm trying to think, we talked about something today. There wasn't enough consensus to even write about it. So some things just kind of die at the table, and then other things turn into editorials for the rest of the week.
You say there wasn't enough consensus to write about it?
Right.
I mean, so there's all of you, or some of you, well, we should say there are 11 people on the board. It starts with Bruce as the editorial page editor, right?
Right.
And then we've got the writers,
right,
which include John McCormick. He's the deputy editorial page editor.
Correct.
Right? And sort of, John strikes me as economic conservative. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean the pages.
The page is economic conservative.
Yeah.
The page is, you can see the principles when you go to the website for the Chicago Tribune. It'll tell you something about the editorial page, the principles of the Chicago Tribune. Come back to that. But the page, in a sense, is free market, is limited government, low spending, low taxes. That's your general inclination of the page of the Chicago Tribune. Going back to?
Oh.
Who's the guy? Who was the colonel? What?
Colonel McCormick,
Right.
yes. I mean,
and he was a pretty much a straight conservative, everything conservative, right?
Yes. And the page, you know, has been very conservative throughout its history. We've gotten a little more socially moderate, I would say, over the last 10 years. Long before I got there, they came out and opposed the death penalty, and that was a big change for the page. We came out in favor of same-sex marriage. That was a change for the page and for the paper.
But these are sort of semi-social issues. I mean, the
Right.
capital punishment and death penalty, I don't know, that's more social than economic. But the one thing that hasn't changed, I think, is clear to say, tell me if I'm wrong, the economic conservatism of the Chicago Tribune.
That's
Would that
true.
be right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it still very much believes limited government, right?
Yes.
Maximize individual liberty, right?
Right.
Free markets, right?
Free markets.
No change in that.
Not really. I mean, there's nuance depending on what the subject of the day is, but no, generally we have favored, you know, entitlement reform, decreasing defense spending, getting rid of farm subsidies. I mean, anything that kind of looks like big government, we have not been in favor.
You also, one of the principles, maybe the major principle other than free markets, I mean, I would say a major principle, perhaps the major principle on your domestic issues would be free markets. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Why are you laughing? I mean, I think I'm getting
Because
that
you
right.
said it about 3 times, so what are you leading up to?
Well, no, because in addition, okay, in addition to that, as a, you know, as a major principle, well, I want to come back to that, but so that's a major principle, and individual freedom is a major principle, and when I say John McCormick, well, the other major principle. What would you say? Free markets, individual freedom, individual responsibility. Think of what does a paper do? What does a newspaper often do? Not just the Tribune. And then you'll think of what's the other major principle for the Chicago Tribune. It's right there in your principles. You should read your website. Isn't it to be a major league watchdog?
Sure.
Overseeing
Absolutely.
government. I mean, if you see a corporate entity, in a sense, those they are overseen by their shareholders, private shareholders. But the government, the private shareholder, the shareholders for a government are, in a sense, every citizen, but they're too diffuse. In Illinois, we have 13 million citizens. They got things to do, and so forth. We only have a few major newspapers left, of which one is the Chicago Tribune, right?
Yeah, we do a lot of accountability editorials and trying to hold people accountable, and we just sent out questionnaires for lawmakers who are running for re-election. I will be looking at their questionnaires from last time around and seeing if they did in fact vote the way they said they were going to vote, pass bills that they said they were going to pass. You know, I watch roll calls pretty closely so that when they do come for an endorsement meeting, we are aware of whether or not they kept their word. That's a big role of the Tribune.
Okay, so that's what I mean by a watchdog. And whether the people who run for office are going to keep their promise. You know, I once had when I was a grad student, I once had a mentor advisor named George Stigler, who was a big guy at the University of Chicago, deceased now, and he would joke and say, I met a lot of students of promise and a few who actually kept it. You might say the same thing about candidates. You probably meet a lot of candidates who promise a lot and a few who will actually keep their promises, right?
Yes.
Probably too few. But so seriously, that's a major role. Free markets is part of your philosophy and what you believe in, but the role is one of doing the investigation. It's one thing to say you're a watchdog, it's another to devote the resources to say go out and look. Like you had a recent story on Mike Madigan, right?
Yes.
News story.
News story, and then a follow-up editorial.
And what was the news story? As I say, we're taping this, may see it at different times, but we're taping it on January 9th, 2014. News story is about a week ago, 10 days ago?
Sunday.
Sunday. And what was it?
This story was, to me, the first time. It was an excellent piece, and I think it really laid out why Speaker Michael Madigan is so powerful. You know, it's almost part of his surname. You see every time he's in the paper, the powerful Speaker Mike Madigan. And so reporters went through and connected about 400 people who have political connections to Michael Madigan and were able to trace whether or not he got them raises, whether he got contracts for them, whether he picked up the phone and made recommendations and those recommendations were followed. So it just gave you an inside look of how deep and wide his net is and why people are so loyal to him, why he has all this power. Because he gets jobs for people and he gets jobs for people's kids and then he gets raises for them once they have a job. So
what do we call that? What's the general one word for that?
It's patronage.
It's patronage. It's the Chicago way, isn't it? And I guess with Mike, it's the Speaker Mike, it's the Illinois way. But we used to joke about the Chicago way. Some people thought when you pass a trash can, it would say the Chicago way, is you put garbage in the trash can. No, no, no. The Chicago way, the Mayor Daley way, where you're talking the old Richard J. Daley, the younger son, Richard M. Daley, you're talking Rahm Emanuel, even the folks in between, Daley and Lee, Sawyer and Blandick and all those guys, and ladies, Jane Byrne. See, this is a cross-gender thing. It doesn't know any bounds by gender.
It's cross-party, too.
Cross-party.
Yeah.
It is the way of politics. Why are people, in a sense, I'm saying, why don't you just give up and go home? Because, you know, if you're, Milton Friedman, you know, great economist from the University of Chicago, now deceased, his way of saying it was just minimize government, because you're going to have waste. But if you make government only 10% of your GDP, the waste is much less than if, like right now, it's 40 or 50% total. Right? Federal,
yes.
State, county, local government, 50% of our GDP goes to funding government, pretty much, right?
It does. And then about 20% of our state budget goes to funding the retirements of state government, the retired workers.
Okay. And I mean, so why don't you just give up? Because it's now 50%. You're going to have all that waste. You can rail about Mike Madigan all you want. Do you really think you can change it?
I think we can make people more aware. I mean, we haven't talked about pensions. We don't have to go there. But I mean, the Chicago Tribune editorial page wrote about pensions for about 6 or 7 years consistently. And finally, the public sort of woke up to the problem, and you had a bill that actually passed out of the legislature. Because, well, there are a few reasons. One, the leaders finally got on board. You had Madigan presenting a bill. And I think the public started to become aware of how much of the budget is dedicated to pensions, and it's unsustainable. Something had to change. We have all these unpaid bills. We have the worst credit rating in the country. We had the highest unemployment rate in the country until a couple of months ago. So I think all of this coverage did eventually lead to change.
Now, you're, and I'm not buttering up the guest here, you're smart, you're aware. You know people like John Tillman at the Illinois Policy Institute, right?
I do. Mm-hmm.
You respect John, right?
Sure, yes.
He says, and his organization says, as do some others, probably the Heartland Institute would probably agree with Joe Bast, heading that organization. Look, this is just a Band-Aid, this legislation. It doesn't adopt a defined contribution system. It still stays with a defined benefit system. Tillman says they're going to be back for 2 or 3 years and they're going to have the same old problems. Why didn't you go the whole thing? I mean, look, just between us girls, really? Don't you think it would be better to have a defined contribution system? You agree with John, right?
We have said that we even when we endorsed this bill and said vote yes on this bill, we said, lawmakers, you'll be back. Eventually, government is going to have to get out of the business of defined contribution plans or defined benefit plans.
Right. Go to a defined contribution plan.
And yes,
Tillman's
some
right.
mix of
just say it. John will like me so much. Can you just say John Tillman's right?
No, I'm not going to say that.
Really?
No,
okay.
I'm not going to say that.
At least his philosophy is right.
I think his philosophy that government cannot sustain these types of programs is correct.
And the Illinois needs a defined contribution system, right?
Eventually, yes.
Okay.
But this bill barely passed. And this is what I've pointed out to people who disagreed with our position on it. If this bill went down, it was status quo, we would have had another credit rating downgrade, and we probably wouldn't have pension reform for another 2 or 3 years. There was a bill in the General Assembly that his institution supported.
And sponsored by?
Jeannie Ives and Tom Morrison in the House. 2 sponsors. That's it.
It had Oberweis in the Senate, but he left, right?
I don't know if he signed off. He eventually
yeah.
voted yes on the bill that came before them.
So he did not go with Ives and Morrison.
My point is,
because he's running for the U.S. Senate, and we like Jim, but here is a case of expediency over principle. He wants to be a little more mainstream. He'd like you folks to endorse him in the Republican primary. He'd like to have a shot of winning the general election. So do you see my point? He's kind of, and it's your point, you might be critical of you. You have these principles. You have the free market stuff and all that stuff, and you kind of played politics a little bit. Said yours could pass, theirs couldn't. I'm not being necessarily critical. I'm just trying to highlight an important issue that I'm sure you face in your editorial board meetings. Sometimes you look at something, and as you're saying now, it's better, we could pass it, we could stick to our principles, but we have 2 or 3 people who are kidding. So you went with the political expediency over what you know in your heart is right.
No. We went with the best decision for the state and taxpayers. That's what we went with. And we have said, vote yes on this bill and then keep working toward a solution. Don't crush the only bill that has gotten to the House floor and the Senate and has any chance of passing and will save money. We can argue over how much it's going to save, but it will save money. The rating agencies are already looking favorably on it.
Are they? Has the rating of Illinois gone up since the passage of this list? Their credit rating? It hasn't, has it?
I don't think, actually one of the agencies put us in up a notch, but actually it's going to take about 2 or 3 years to get back to where we were.
Well, before they'll even raise your credit rating? If it's as significant as you say, wouldn't you expect, because some people sat in your chair and they said, I don't remember who, may think of it later, and said, you know, we'll know if this is working, not when the Chicago Tribune says it, not when the politicians say it, not when the academics say it, when the rating agency says, oh, looking at that legislation, we're now going to upgrade the credit of the state of Illinois, and that hasn't happened yet.
I believe one of the rating agencies did.
A minor nudge or something, but not traumatic.
We have to go into the bond market again before we will actually get to see what that happens.
Oh, when we go into the bond market, you'll see if they now give a higher rating on the bonds issued by the state of Illinois.
Yes.
Because you believe, as we said, free markets. So you believe, as well as me, as well as Bruce Stoll, pretty much as well as everybody in the Chicago Tribune editorial board, would that be going too far? Believe in free markets, right?
The board, the page, believes in free markets. Yeah, we're a diverse board, though.
And we'll come back to this, but you're a big believer in school choice, right?
I am.
School vouchers, charter schools, so forth. You're also one of the main people on that board to write about state, city, and county issues, government issues. That's your beat, so to speak. You share that with other people, not to be exclusive. Okay, so we mentioned McCormick, who's key economic conservative. Go along with that, right?
I'm not going to characterize
come on up.
the politics of individual members.
Craig Burns, he's a business issue guy. That would be fair.
Yeah.
His background's in business. He's more of a moderate. We've seen him on Chicago Week in Review. He's a moderate guy, right?
You can talk to him and make
You're
that
not going to say that? You don't have an opinion?
I'm not going to characterize the board members. I can tell you who they are and what beats they cover.
Well, are you a moderate? Are you a conservative? Are you social conservative, economic? You can talk about yourself. What about you?
I'm all over the place. I don't know what I'm really fiscally conservative.
Fiscally, okay.
Yeah.
But as to the social issues, you're sort of all over the place. You wouldn't say you're social conservative. You wouldn't say you're a social liberal.
Correct.
You're still right in between.
Yes.
Okay. So covered you, Burns, McCormick. You three are writers. There are people on the editorial board who are on there but not writers. But you three are writers, right?
Correct.
And there are 3 other writers, right?
Yes.
6. Steve Chapman, he's a libertarian columnist.
He's a columnist and he writes editorials as well.
But he's also a civil liberties guy. He's a gun owner rights guy, right?
Yes.
Would it be, I mean, you've seen this. It wouldn't be odd. It wouldn't be going too far on the branch for you to say he is a libertarian, right?
No, he is a libertarian.
He would say he's a libertarian himself, okay. So, and then we got Paul Weingarten, right?
Paul Weingarten, he does a lot of our healthcare and education issues and foreign policy.
And foreign policy, Middle East, okay. He was developed a specialty, I believe. He's been there about a dozen years or so.
Right.
Okay. And Marie Dillon, she's a writer?
She's a writer.
She focuses on?
She focuses on immigration. She does a lot of our transportation. She does some city hall. She does a lot of our kind of quirky, fun editorials.
Would you say she's a conservative or a liberal?
I'm not going to characterize the
Paul Weingarten, conservative or liberal?
You can talk to them if you want to.
Okay. So, and then we've got, let's round out the rest of the board.
Jody Hofstetter is our editor for the Letters.
Okay.
Letters to Editor, Voices of the
Voice
People.
of the People. Okay.
Marsha Lithcott is the commentary page editor, so people who submit op-eds go through her.
Okay.
And like Eric Zorn joins us for our meetings.
Eric does that. He's not listed on your page.
He's not on the board. He's not on the board.
But he joins
us in meetings just because it's fun. And it gives him ideas.
And does he also get to speak?
Oh, sure.
So he's like ex officio editorial board member.
Exactly. Yes, we love having Eric around. And then Scott Stantis is our editorial cartoonist. He's on the board. Okay. And we have a coordinator, Jessica Reynolds. I think that's everybody.
And that's, and Clarence Page, he's on the board, isn't he?
He is on the board. He's in D.C. So
he doesn't always participate? Or
no.
If he does, it would be by speakerphone? Or he generally
rarely.
Doesn't? So he's sort of on the board as almost ex officio?
Right.
Okay. I think that, okay, so we pretty much covered it.
Yeah, that's
But I'm
everything.
glad to hear, Eric, I didn't know, because the man has inordinately good taste because he's often been a guest on this show.
Has he?
Yeah. He's written a great column years ago about this guy Berkowitz, I don't know. Seriously, the man has
Yeah.
excellent taste. No, but seriously, we like Eric. And he's somebody who's mixed because in terms of his ideology, he'd probably want you to say, me to say he's a strong liberal, which he is, but he often deviates, I don't know often, but with some frequency deviates from the liberal line. Mm-hmm. He's pretty big on he's sort of big on gun rights, I think, because I think he sees empirical evidence that use of guns, perhaps defensively, is, I think, I'm speaking for Eric and I shouldn't, but I know he surprised some of the liberals that he takes a view that's generally viewed as more conservative.
He has, and when, I mean, as Illinois was on, just as we were going through the concealed carry bill process, and as he learned more about it, I think, yeah, he was actually, I mean, I favored concealed carry, and he kind of, I was able to pull him a little bit to my side.
And all kidding aside, everybody knows Eric is, what, twice a week as a columnist for the Chicago Tribune. He used to be 3 times a week, but now he does a lot of work on the blog.
He does an
so he's given a lot
blog.
of credit for that. He does an excellent blog. I sometimes call him father of blogging. I got started, many people got their start through Eric.
Yes, he was the first person I really started following.
But the other thing is he does this thing in the Cabbage Patch or whatever, a multitude of things where he seeks out different viewpoints on an issue and gets people to write on that issue on both sides.
Right.
So he's a big believer in what I think the Tribune is, getting multiple sides of the issue out, discussed, even though your editorials tend to be pretty, is that word I was using? Free market, right?
Right.
Right. So people watching the show, by the end of the show, if you have to think about anything for the Chicago Tribune editorial board, and you can only think of 2 words, it would be?
I would say less government is probably a better...
Better than free market?
Yeah. I would say that's a consistent principle throughout any subject we're writing on.
Okay, so I stand corrected now. All right, but I think we've given people a pretty good idea of the editorial board. But if we want to give it the dynamics, as we said, Monday to Thursday, you meet every Monday and Thursday, the board does.
We do.
Okay, and you sort of, so I was wondering, how do you get something written? How do the things get assigned? I thought it may be like the king, who still walks in and says, okay, Kristin, you do this, John, you do that.
No.
Chapman, how does it work?
People think that there's, you know, outside corporate interest at the Tribune editorial board or something, and it's just, it couldn't be further from the truth. We bring our own ideas. I mean, I bring my own ideas in and pitch them to the board, and if there's consensus and it feels like a good editorial, write it. And it's the same with everybody else. So the topics that come up could be anything from, we had a long debate about dibs, the whole parking, you know, putting lawn chairs in the street. Right. So we had a long debate about that. We talk about immigration policy. We talk about school choice. We talk about, I mean, anything that is in the news that day or that we have ideas about.
So let's get real serious. We only have about 5 minutes left, so we're going to have to do like 5 issues real quick on the editorials. Okay. Recently, you pushed for concealed carry, and you got Bruce Stoll to agree. The Tribune came out essentially for concealed carry. Did I get that right?
We came out and we told
Much
Pat
more
Quinn
favorable.
to sign the bill.
Okay. And that took some work on part of you and others on the board to persuade Bruce that was a good thing, right?
I think the page traditionally has been a little more gun control, and so there was a little discomfort in, you know, moving ahead with concealed carry.
But you went ahead. Bruce was persuaded at the end of the day.
I think so.
You guys rolled him, sir. No, I'm just kidding, Bruce. No, I'm just kidding. All right, Obama. You folks endorsed Obama in 2008, right?
We did.
That's like, what principles? We've gone over the principles. Smart principles, limited government, less spending, less regulation, less taxes. Do you associate any of that with Barack Obama?
In 2008, I wasn't on the board.
I think go ahead and defend him, Mitch. Now you're a hired lackey. No, I'm just kidding.
There were a lot of newspaper editorial boards who endorsed Obama in 2008. He had a lot of promise. I think he put himself out there as not being as liberal as he has become. And so, yes, we endorsed him in 2008, and then we endorsed him again in 2012.
And you endorsed him in 2008. Did you vote for him? In 2008, did you vote for Barack?
I did vote for Barack Obama in 2008.
But then you unendorsed him in 2012?
Well, the endorsement process for president is a little different.
No, I don't mean you. Oh. I'm saying personally you voted. Did you vote for him?
I did not vote for President Obama in 2012.
But you did in 2008?
Yeah.
Okay. So something happened to give you pause. What was that?
I just don't like the direction that the country is heading in terms of our deficit and our debt. And I felt that a Republican candidate would do a better job getting a handle on it. Medicare reform, Social Security reform, that's what this country needs.
And he's not doing enough. And so you said you're going with Romney.
I did.
Okay. The thing you're really most passionate about, school choice?
It's among them, yeah.
It's
and
among
that
them.
and that dates back to my time at the Southtown, because I wrote for years about the need to change the funding formula because we're so reliant on property taxes, and it's so unfair. And I just got so impatient with the General Assembly never doing anything about that, never caring about this huge gap. So
Gap
in what wealthy schools have and what
So
low-income schools have.
why do you like school vouchers and school choice?
Because I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of waiting for them to fix the problem.
So you think school vouchers, school choice, without any change in distribution, might give low-income kids or kids of low-income parents more choice, better quality?
That's it. Just a choice.
It's just choice.
Yeah. They can decide. They're not stuck at their neighborhood school.
Okay. Minimum wages is a lot in the news lately. It's kind of curious. Is the Chicago Tribune in favor of minimum wages?
We have generally been in favor of minimum wage, but we have not been in favor of raising the minimum wage. And I think we were uncomfortable when Illinois got out of step with the national minimum wage.
Yeah, but don't you know, I mean, you know a little economics, right? Demand
Not
and
as
supply.
much as you, Jeff.
Now, demand and supply intersect as a free market. If you raise the wage, if you have a minimum wage, it's above the market wage. Demand goes down, supply goes up, you create unemployment. Why? Bruce Rauner got this right recently. He's running for governor, and he said he would be in favor of lowering the minimum wage. That's actually, I think it would be nice if you could persuade the board. If they believe in free markets, they should say, Bruce got it right. There'd be less unemployment with a lower minimum wage. Bruce was turned around by his guys, his handlers. Bruce, come on the show, I'm on your side. Because they knew it would be difficult to explain or difficult to persuade. But I think Bruce Dole knows this. Abolishing the minimum wage would immediately create more employment, give people more jobs. If they had low income because their wages would lower, supplement that income. That's what Milton Friedman would do, but don't take their job away. Just give and don't take away some of the benefits they get more income, like food stamps, etc., but don't take so much of away. Always give people an incentive to work, to be self-sustaining. If it's a low income, that's the problem, not that it's a low-paying job. Do you understand?
I do. I don't think that differs much from our position, and Kirk Dillard actually came out after that.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.